3, 2, 1.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So that's kind of Ryan to give you all some kind of warning, but
That's very nice.
that's not what I do.
Where did it go?
Yeah, he doesn't
Someone's
warn.
dancing.
Someone's that's what you're getting.
Thank you again for agreeing to do this webcast and give those people who didn't get the opportunity to do the lab the opportunity. So we're appreciative.
No, it's awesome. I like sharing knowledge. And I think the more knowledge you share, the more you learn, right? So I think the swag bag lab, I was just to tell you, the swag bag lab was just kind of this thing that started out of there. It was John called me, hey, we got something we could do that's virtual. And I've been thinking about it for a while, like, because Velda's like, hey, can we do a lab virtually? I'm like, gosh, it's just the stuff that we have in our labs is just so expensive. I hate to have somebody go buy a tabular for $330, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been sleeping on it, and then John calls me about probably a week later, and he's like, is there something we can do? And I'm like, I've been thinking about it. I think I got something. Let's see if we can make it work. And it was under the gun. It was a lot of late nights trying to get that set up and go on, just because it was kind of a pinch. But it was cool. It was fun. Learned a lot. There's some things I know I would do different, but that's how you learn. And then we got some other stuff coming up too, so I'll be excited to start talking about that too.
Rick, do you want to talk about the door behind you?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So
I think that's really cool.
There's a door?
No, there's a door. My little door.
Is that wall a door? Oh, okay.
There, that door.
It's a secret door.
So I push this in, the wall comes in.
Yes, hold on.
And he's in Baltimore.
This is kind of
Up the whole door.
Wild West, right?
Yes, I'm wearing pants. Okay. So
That could have
this
been
is
terrible.
Covering a lot here. Covering a lot.
This is the door that I made. So we actually have three of these. Three of us testers, or an intern. Two testers intern. I made these. So we have doors. These will be Wild West Hackin Fest. And it's Bluetooth. So this is the Kiwi Smart Lock. If you look at any of our blogs, Ray Felch did a nice blog on exploiting it, Bluetooth, which F-Secure did, I think, first. And then he went back and reverse engineered the app all the way back through. And I think since the new app is fixed, but you're still able to capture Bluetooth and replay the code and open up the house lock. So if you've been to Wild West Hackin Fest before, you know we have these huge doors. So that's just something that just doesn't travel very well. When we do that, we will do that in Deadwood when we go physical eventually. But it will not be in San Diego. So this is kind of our San Diego setup that we're going with. And we'll have it in Deadwood as well. We'll actually probably have this on one of the big doors in Deadwood. So that'll be fun.
That's awesome.
I think it'll be way cool.
Mhm.
Thank you
Yeah, we
guys.
get some cool labs coming up, some cool stuff that we're working on. We're hoping to have done before San Diego. Like we're looking at a badge, a hackable badge that would actually be part of. If we had to go virtual, we get a badge that you can hack as well. So there's your hands-on lab. And the big thing about that is that to build the badge, you're trying to look at costs. We're looking at these small components and stuff that we can do to make the labs cost-worthy, yet still give valuable content to everybody who attends. And I think it's going to be fun. We're super excited about it. And we're working on that right now, David, Fletcher, and myself.
Is that today, Rick?
No, that's not today. Thank goodness. This was about a month ago. So that's the outhouse.
Oh, nice. Oh, it is so pretty. Never thought I'd say that outhouse is beautiful, but
Well,
Wait
honestly,
till you
Devin, it's
smell
kind
it.
of beautiful.
that's a nice looking outhouse you got there.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very
You
much.
dig that hole yourself?
Yep, by hand. No.
Backhoe?
Yeah, we used something. I don't know what it was. It was a track hoe.
So that's the cabin we're looking at, right?
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
Yeah, this is
Beautiful.
last Christmas. So this was inside. We had a nice fire going. It was nice.
It was beautiful. That's beautiful, Rick. Oh my gosh. Your wife is so good at decorating.
Oh, I know. My wife.
She's amazing.
Rocks. Yeah.
Amazing ideas.
Do you hack all those lights?
No, I cannot hack those lights. Yeah, I wish I had time to hack all kinds of stuff, but you gotta work, right? So
We just converted our whole house to smart outlets and smart lights and Phillips shoe bulbs and everything. And my daughter, as soon as we told her, like, hey, we did all this, she's like,
Not the clap on.
that's fine.
How does she know what that is?
we didn't install a clapper. You gotta go in your phone.
There's an
Go
app.
to the app. You have to make a lot of decisions in order to turn on a light now.
Ryan, you're not going to have a lot of stuff to keep with this one.
That's all right. I'll just recycle old stuff or something. Mark this. Slate it. We're starting. And we've got Rick here. He's going to give us a presentation on a swag bag lab. Tell us, Rick, what is a swag bag lab?
I'm glad you asked. So Swag Bag Lab is something we come up with for Wild West Hackin Fest. We really wanted to do something hands-on. That's what we try to make our whole conference about is hands-on. So there's a few of us testers that really dig in to find stuff that we can do hands-on so you can learn some stuff. It'd be the door lab, hardware hacking, JTagulator stuff. We do the wireless labs and stuff. So that's pretty cool. But trying to do that virtually is tough. So Felda asked me, the ranger asked me, or deputy asked me way back if there was something we could do. And it took me a while to think about it. And then I came up with the Swag Bag Lab. Swag Bag Lab was something that I wanted to do that made sure that attendees got something that they could reuse, right? We could send you a dev board, but if you don't have a JTagulator or the CH341A or a bus pirate or something like that, you don't have the tool. We just kind of went the opposite. We gave you the tool, gave you a chip, and then you can use the tool on anything, which is cool, which I liked. But so we'll start with the introduction. My name is Rick Wisser. I'm a security analyst here at Black Hills Information Security. My father, three kids, 2 boys and a girl, all teenagers. It's great. Don't recommend it. It was great. And I'm a volunteer. I volunteer for several things. Fire board here in town, in my hometown, as well as search and rescue for the county. Really like getting outside and doing that kind of stuff. I like to hunt, fish, home remodeling. My wife and I have a couple rentals we remodeled, and they're going pretty good. Really that's kind of my escape when I go do remodeling. We've been building a cabin for 3 years, my wife and I, with a couple friends, and it's been just awesome. It's been fun. Really a way to disconnect from the digital world. And then off-grid. I got an off-grid because I wanted to build something that I didn't have to pay the man anymore, right? We don't want to pay the man anymore. So I went off-grid, and I'm really happy with it. It's been going really good. If you have any questions about that or how my setup is, I definitely will happy to share that with you because it was a learning curve for me. But it was really cool. On top of that, I share some links in Discord. These links are some firmware that I'll be discussing that you can look at. And then later at the end, I will share the links for the solutions. So you can have both of them. Don't look at the solutions if you want to try to do it yourself. If you get caught or have a problem, go ahead and look at the solutions. So let's start. I talked about the link. This is the same link that I gave before. Swag Bag Lab string portion is all we're doing. I'll walk you through the binwalk part. But then with the real world, the Analyze Me firmware, that you'll be able to do binwalk and everything on that on your own. So you can go through that. It's pretty cool. You're going to see some cool stuff here. So the first hint on the strings lab, this is in case you guys can't wait. The first hint on the strings lab, and then that's on the WNDR firmware that I uploaded, is run the strings WNDR webflash.bin grep HTTP, and that's pretty much go, and then you're ready to go. So it'll lead you through some clues. The firmware definitely is not, it's just a firmware from a router. I modified it to do some stuff that we would normally do, kind of like a CTF in it. So you put it on your router, it probably wouldn't work. But it is the concept of using the strings and binwalk was the purpose of the lab. So going back to the plan, I'm going to walk through some preliminary stuff, how I got to the lab, what we did, and then I'm going to talk about having an intermission, and then you can work through stuff. The intermission is not an intermission. The intermission, we will walk through the real world stuff, and then we'll come back to the solutions for the strings from our lab. Existing virtual labs, we had some options. We ship a door to everyone. That wasn't going to happen. This is a picture of Deadwood, the Doors Lab. If you ever been there, this was something that David Fletcher and myself put together a couple of years ago. Love this lab. It's a lot of fun. Hopefully, we're looking to have a new door locks, different kinds of setups on it every year. So we'll be moving that stuff around. I want to give you something that's useful and beneficial, and knowledge share. Like I said in the pre-banter, just doing this lab was a huge learning curve for me. I mean, I knew a lot of this stuff, but I know stuff now that I would do differently, which is cool. That's part about teaching. You actually learn more, I think, teaching than actually doing it. So the process, so the swag bag lab we're talking about, we got 550 CH341s shipped to my house. As I was under the wire, I had to flash all these chips. So this is my basement in my cabin. I just set up a bunch of laptops. I use the CH341 actually as a programmer. And what I was able to do was to chip clip every one of those, debag them, chip clip every one of them, put them back in and do it. It took me about 3 days to do this. But after I got a process, like anything else, it went pretty quick. And the goal was to create a puzzle. I had to save the firmware. I use firmware mod kit is a program you can get out there. I use that to modify the firmware and then also repackage the firmware and then flash it to the SPI chip. Let's talk about CH341. This thing is awesome. I wrote a blog post a while back about it. During Wild West Hackin Fest, a lot of people went and looked at that blog post and actually had the firmware dumped before we started. But I hid the strings file within the firmware so that they had to use binwalk to get to the strings file because I knew people would probably get going. It's probably being a jerk, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to do that just so people could say, hey, I dumped the firmware. There's nothing there. So it's pretty cool. SPI, it's the CH341 is an SPI I2C programmer. So the 25X is the SPI chips, and if you come across a 24XXX, it's a I2C chip. So the difference between the chips is the SPI is new, it's faster, it does full duplex. And I2 squared, you're going to see an older stuff, maybe some new stuff, depending on the trace line, because it only uses 2 bus lines, the I2C, where the SPI uses 4. And it's also, the I2C is only half duplex. What's the advantage of the CH341 over other programmers? They say, hey, I got a bus pipe, I got a Shikra, I got a whatever else you got. The advantage of the CH341 I found, and I stumbled across this because I had a chip that it was a engagement that I had that I couldn't destroy the board. They didn't want me to destroy the board, no destruction. So I didn't want to desolder the chip because the bus pirate wouldn't beat it unless I did desolder it or the Shikra. So I came across this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. Had it shipped to my house, Amazon one day. And lo and behold, it clipped it on there and it dumped the firmware. And so a lot of the times I haven't run across anything yet that I haven't been able to just chip clip on. There's been a couple times where I've had a capacitor in the way or a chip in the way that I can't chip clip, get it on there. But then that's really nice because I could just solder wires onto that and just go manual to that. So some tricks just to work around stuff that we had to do. But this is awesome. It does a lot of stuff. It's just a good programmer. We had different software options that I used. So in my blog post, I used AS Programmer. That's because I didn't know if Flash ROM actually supported it. I don't even know if it did at the time that I wrote the blog post. But you can use Flash ROM, and that's what I used to program all the chips. There's a picture of all the chips, or some of the chips sitting there, and me chip clipping them and stuff. Flash ROM is a really cool tool. There's some tips and tricks to that too. So we'll talk about that here shortly. But let's take a step back. We give you the lab, give you the firmware. Here you go. Here's how you do it. But in all reality, when you're going to go and look at something, or you're going to do some testing on something, or anything, you can have a methodology. The methodology really consists of many steps, but I usually go through preparation. What am I looking at? What's the goal here? Am I going to dump the firmware? Am I looking to see if it's transferring securely? Transferring data securely? Does it transfer data? How does it transfer data? Reconnaissance, in my opinion, is probably one of the most important steps, because reconnaissance, you can find out a lot of stuff right away without even looking at the device, other than maybe the serial number or what the type of device is, and you can get some information. And I'll talk about that later, how important that is. Scanning over the board, looking at the hardware, doing scanning as what the communication is. What is it? Bluetooth? Are we going to see if we can sniff some Bluetooth traffic? Are we going to sniff other protocols that are available? And then analysis. Analysis is really just looking at saying, hey, what is on the board? What kind of chips are on the board? What are we getting from the scans? Are we able to man in the middle? Kind of leads you into the attack. The next step is attack surface. What's available? What can you attack? Is there a 20 SPI chip on the board, or is it an I2C, or is there just JTAG, nothing there? Just kind of leads you into what kind of attack surface are you going to, and how you can approach attacking the device. Reconnaissance. I said reconnaissance is important, really important, very important. Renaissance, no reconnaissance. So, a funny story about that. Every time I write a report, I always cannot spell reconnaissance for anything, and I always were really heavily replying spell check. I don't know why, just can't spell it. So, if you think I take time to, okay, let's get it right, I just can't do it. It's very significant, and actually through the steps, I'll get through a part and I'll find something else out, and then I'll go back and do some more reconnaissance on that. You might find some more information that helps you, gives you more insight. Hey, I should do some reconnaissance on this to see if there's something about that as well. It's in a category by itself, but I think that actually through all the steps, you might come to a point where you have to go back to reconnaissance. Pen testing, I've had to do that before as well. That's given me access to play, especially on a red team. We did reconnaissance one time. We didn't find anything. We started going through. We found some other stuff, did some more reconnaissance. The next thing you know, we went into the network. It was really cool. So I really think reconnaissance is important, but it's in my opinion. Let's talk about the chip. SBL was SPI chip that I chose was the same chip that I used in the blog post that I had put, just because it was very easy and it was pretty cheap, 50 cents or something. I chose this off the WNDR 3700 router. There's MX25L6445E SPI chip. Lots of stuff there. You put a lot of stuff in it. I talked about the 25 versus the 24. CH341 can do both. The firmware was dumped off the SPI chip, and then I modified that firmware with the firmware mod kit, as I talked about before. SB Lab walkthrough. This part I'm going to walk through, which is the binary, the binwalk portion, with the firmware that I upload the Analyze Me firmware. That firmware, you can do this same thing through with that, and you'll find more interesting stuff. So with the lab, we had you extract the firmware here using Flash ROM. Here's a trick for using Flash ROM. If you do a pseudo Flash ROM programmer, then you give it a C341 and you have it hooked to your USB port, it will find the chip for you. Not all the time, but most of the time it'll find it. And for instance, like the chip here, they identify several chips in one because they all pinouts all the same. So instead of, you can't just put in MX2564445E. You have to put this whole string in. So what I do is I just run this, and then I just copy that string. You give the -C option, which is shown down here, is the actual chip. The -S programmer is the device you're using. and then the dash read, which is R for read, the firmware. If you wanted to write firmware to the chip, you do the W. There's other flags you can use as well. But that's how I dumped the firmware off the chip. And you can use AS Programmer as well. I just don't go over it here. It's a little bit more cumbersome, takes a lot more stuff, and it's hard. It can be hard to install. So what is binwalk? Binwalk is a tool for searching given binary image for embedded files and executable code. Very cool, unpacks stuff for you, extracts things for you. The flags that I used were the M, which recursively scans the extracted files. So it goes through recursively and scans those and extracts them as it goes, and then scans them. And then the -E option is what extracts the known file types. Once you've ran this, you get a file called whatever you named it, firmware.bin.extracted. And browsing that folder image, you'll see it opens up a whole lot of stuff. There's a lot of different things in there. There's a password file. There's depending on the device, right? Password file. There may be configuration files. And in this case, what it is, the question I had for the swag bag lab was, what was the port that the backdoor was in the config file? In this case, the config file was in the rc.d, etc.rc.d directory, and it was in the rc.wlan config file. And here I show you a screenshot of that. And then as BusyBox was the backdoor placed in this, for instance, this firmware. Onto the strings portion, I provided the bin file for you to look at that. The only hint that was given during the swag bag lab was this strings command. That was a hint to get you going. And then if you look at that, you'll find something else interesting that'll lead you to another clue and another clue and so on. And then that's pretty much how the strings lab works. We'll come back to that, but I'm going to talk about some real world stuff and during the intermission. So you guys should have all this in Discord, the link, and we will go to the intermission, as I call it. So the firmware analysis lab, Mazda, is a Mazda CMU, which is the head unit on your Mazda, and it's the actual board that's the computer in the Mazda device or Mazda car. Real world, why not? Let's look at it. While we're doing this swag bag lab, David Fletcher was sitting alongside of me, and we dumped the firmware right there, and we started playing with this, and we found some interesting stuff, which is pretty cool. I did share this firmware during the swag bag lab. Not many people dug into it, but it is Wild West Hackin Fest, and there was talks to go to and stuff, and I totally understand. But so that's why we're giving this talk. So we dumped the firmware with CH341. Found out that actually the chip was exactly the same one. It was the MX6445E. And then we started our analysis. We found some information as here. I just blown this up here, but just look using binwalk, just doing the dash V will give you some information about the firmware. And in this case, we found out that there was a developer. It looks like he helped with the project. This Steve Frigeg. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but pretty interesting. Some reconnaissance, right? So you get some information. Maybe we can go look this guy up and see what he actually does. We didn't go that far, but we thought, oh, this is pretty cool. So then we moved on. And we also, in that same step, we found out the Linux kernel version is 3.0.35. The interesting thing is, if you ever find a version of anything anywhere, you're going to go and look and see if there's any publicly known exploits for it. And that's what we did. We found out that the CD details for that kernel, here's a screenshot of the stuff that we found. Some remote code execution. Looks like it's very vulnerable to that. So, and being one of the newer smart cards, it doesn't get a firmware update all the time. The Mazda, the actual CMU we used. So this probably doesn't get updated at all. So the kernel will be this way forever, and it'll be vulnerable forever, which is something I think the auto industry is working on. And I think some people that have I don't have a smart card, but people that do or have a car with a computer in it, they've seen it connect over Wi-Fi and catch stuff. I think Dave Fletcher did some stuff with a Leaf where he actually was able to finally capture man in the middle, the firmware that was downloaded to his device. I don't know if he ever did anything with that. I should ask him that. That'd be interesting. And then the final thing we did, which is really cool, is we looked at browsed through the file directory, the /fs folder, in the root folder, and we found the password PSSWD file in there. And so then we catted that file, and we noticed that there's some hashes in there and stuff. So yeah, what the heck? Let's just throw John at it and see what happens. So we threw John at it, and we found the password. And the nice thing about the password is JCI. If you were to go look at the documentation for the FCC ID number on this particular CMU, you would find that it was made by Johnson Controls Incorporated. So very interesting. And I have to put a plug in here because this is something that Dave Fletcher and myself went to Graham's car hacking class, which was very cool. I highly recommend it if you get a chance to go there. You get to work with a Mazda CMU. But the cool thing about it is they don't go through the firmware, but they go through other things you can do with it. And this is one of them. And so you end up finding out JCI is a password, and you do that by Reconnaissance, of course. And why Reconnaissance is so awesome. We could have guessed at it, tried JCI, and got it. So that's the CMU lab portion, the intermission portion. And I highly recommend you guys take that out and play with it, look for some other stuff, because we didn't go through all of it. This was just something we did, kind of Wild West Hackin Fest going on in between people bugging us on the lab, asking questions. So yeah, check it out. If you find anything interesting, just shoot me a message or something, and it'd be really cool to see that. I eventually will come back to this and look at it, but who knows when I'll have time to do that, of course. Best intermission ever. Actually learned something. We're going to go back to strings. Here, we extract the file. Here's the clue we gave you. Here's the file we gave you. We do a strings on that. And we get this hint here, check out email PW. So okay, let's go check that out. So we do a grep on email, and when we do a grep on email, we find this interesting string here. That's what is that? As most of you know, usually can recognize this right away. It's a base 64 string. We encode a base 64 string into it, and then we decode that. Once we decode that, we get this out of it. WLA A underscore key 1, A equals R. So A equals R, that's interesting. So you go through and you do a strings on the bin file again for WLA underscore key, or we can do key 1, and then we get this mess, which is a mess. What is that? So remember that A equals R was a hint in that. So it must be through the cipher. So I was going to just do a simple replacement cipher. A equals R, B equals S. But actually, I did it the other way. I went backwards on that. So to go backward, this got a few people, but a lot of people got it. It was pretty cool. So after you do that, you go ahead and you decipher that, and you get the strings from where.bin, and you do the grep PSK. So we do that translation. After we do the translation, we get the end. So you get the end of the strings dumped into the lab, and you've went through it. My goal was to put more in here, but with the time constraints, I wasn't able to do that. And it looks like I did it under half an hour, which I was concerned I was going to take me a lot more time than that. So let's talk about some other stuff coming up. We have some more exciting stuff coming in the future. Dave Fletcher and myself are actually working on an IoT pin testing class, which I think would be pretty cool. We're just getting into the development stages of that. I think we have the slides almost figured out. We're trying to find some hardware that we can use for the lab. And also we're looking at, as I said earlier, looking at doing something with the badge. Yeah. Yeah, car hacking class. Awesome. Definitely do it.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
So with the things that you covered, how can this be used for IoT hacking, or can it be used for IoT hacking?
Yeah, they can. You can definitely open some stuff up. You know, what I usually do, Dave Fletcher and myself will actually go to garage sales. And that's a great place to find used electronics or Army surplus store. Grab that stuff, and then open it up, see what's in there, do some analysis on it, some reconnaissance on it, so you can find, and then see what's in the firmware, if you can get to the firmware, or if not, JTAG later. But this is the most of the time, the small IoT stuff, you're going to find a firmware chip with it somewhere. It might be the I2C or the SPI chip.
Will a firmware chip always have some kind of input where you can connect to it, or is that?
Pretty much most time. There's times where firmware may be embedded in a processor or in a ball grid array chip. A ball grid array chip is a chip that you can't see any of the leads on. Usually it's just a bunch of solder balls on the bottom of it, and it goes onto a grid onto the board. So you might not get to that. That's when you might have to pull out the JTAGulator or something similar, or JTAG analysis on that, which we can cover. That'd be something we'll be covering in our hardware hacking class, definitely.
You got a question here from Carlos 705. What IoT kit should a beginner buy?
IoT kit. I don't know if I've actually really bought a kit. I've just kind of did it willy-nilly, I guess. So I buy, CH241 is a good one. Bus Pirate, the Shikra are good. JTAGulator is something good. But if you also look at you can make the same, use JTAG enum and do the same thing with a Raspberry Pi as a JTAGulator. There's some stuff out there you can do to make it the same.
Rick, any chance, did you have, let me start from scratch. Did you have a chance to play with Hardsploit?
I have not had a chance to play with Hardsploit.
Okay. And then can you give some examples of Recon for hardware type stuff? Like, do you go to, what I've been around you all a long time. And so I normally know that you go to the manuals, you Google like the thing that comes with it. Like, is that what you're talking about, Reconnaissance, or is it different than that?
No, Reconnaissance, yeah. So most stuff has an FCC ID number on it. You can go to FCC the website and get that information from there. Could
you slow down and what those words are, like one at a time? FCI.
FCCI. So the FCC is the one who approves the device. So if it's communicating Bluetooth or wireless or anything, that's the government agency that says, okay, this device isn't going to harm an airplane and make it crash. So they have a database of all this stuff that's publicly available. So you can go to the FCC website and you can look at that information for that particular ID that's on the device. And that'll give you a lot of information. In this case, like with the Mazda firmware, it gives you the company that made it. It gives you other pertinent information like what's it working on, is Bluetooth, is it using BLE, is it using what other protocols is it using to communicate, Wi-Fi. And then also in some of them, you might even have schematics there where you can actually look at the schematics. Schematics is a huge one. If you can get the schematics of any of the IoT devices, then definitely pretty cool, because that'll help you take a lot of guesswork out of what this is doing. I have a background, an electrical engineering degree, and so it's really easy to look at a board and say, okay, this circuit does this. But it's a lot easier to look at a schematic and say, okay, that's how that circuit works. And without the traces and stuff that you see on the board, some of them are 3 or 4 layers deep. Those traces may be embedded. You don't know if this chip's connected to that chip or not without physically going and ohming everything out. With a schematic, you know that chip's connected to this chip down the line and this chip down the line and so on.
So one of the issues that people who deal with embedded type products have is that the supply line, like where you're getting the chips, are potentially hacked prior to them even getting to the final destination. Is that something that you've ever done any pen testing for or found? Or
No, I have not, but I actually know the concern. I worked for a contract manufacturing for 10 years. And that's what we did. We bought parts, in bulk from whatever what the cheapest cost was, right? Because you're trying to lower your cost so you make coin on the back side. So a lot of that I've heard about stuff being embedded with firmware or with malicious malware or something, but I've never ran across it. And this was, 20 years ago. I worked for a contract manufacturer, so I don't think it was really a big deal at that time. But I haven't run across it, but I've heard about it.
Mm-hmm. And then when you do get to the firmware, like what are you looking for? Are you doing reconnaissance once you download the firmware? Are you doing reconnaissance prior to downloading the firmware?
Yeah, that's a good question. So normally I'll just do the reconnaissance, just kind of to go start looking for stuff, see what I can find out about it. Sometimes you might have to pull the device apart. Maybe there's the FCC numbers inside put it on the board, or there might be a tag inside there. So usually I'll probably pull the device apart first. You might have to do some reconnaissance on how to pull the device apart as well. So, there was a time when I did some practicing on a laptop. A laptop, that's got to have some kind of chips and stuff in there, right? So what I did is I went and did some Googling, did some searching. How do I take this thing apart without damaging it? Because I really like to, use it as a backup or something. So, I went and did some research. The people have YouTube videos all out there on how to take apart different flavors of laptops. Just took that apart and then went from there. So reconnaissance is, it's ongoing, as I say, because you might stumble across something like, what does this chip actually do? For instance, the 25, the SPI chip that we're looking at. Once you identified the chip, then you're going back to reconnaissance. You're like, what's this chip do? Well, can I get the data sheet on it? How's the pinouts on it? And there's data sheets for everything. Now, interesting, during the Swag Bag Lab, during Wild West Hackin Fest, one of the attendees had an I2C chip that he was trying to dump the firmware off of, and we communicated for a while. It was really awesome. And he I don't think he ever was able to find a pinout on that, on how it was. And there's other things too that you won't find a pinout on. There might be a proprietary chip. When I worked at contract manufacturer, there's chips that are made for some customers that were proprietary. They didn't show the schematics. They didn't want to show the schematics. It was just made for their device. So in that case, you're like, you can't find it. You can go look and look and look, unless you can bribe somebody at maybe at Microchip or somewhere like that to get the schematic. But usually that's not available.
Yeah. So I'm one of those people that believe that all of this is black magic. That somehow electrons are generated in a factory that travel across lines that go into this device, and then this device makes ones and zeros work. It's just all magic, and I'm looking for a confirmation that it's magic.
Oh yeah, no, it is. If you blow a cap up, the magic smoke comes out. It doesn't work anymore, right? No, actually, it's just a lot of ones and zeros that are going through there. It's still magic to me. I think it's magic to everybody, until you really dig down into it and understand how this circuit works and reacts with that circuit and goes back and forth. You just start dumping firmware. I invite everybody to go open up something they have laying around, an IoT device, and see if they can find some firmware in there and see what it is and see if there's anything interesting in it. It's really cool. And that's part of the reason why with the Swag Bag Lab is we wanted to give somebody something that was a tool. We want to give them a tool instead of just give them something that they need to get tools to work on. So it's pretty cool that we were able to do that.
And so we gave people the hardware device for the Swag Bag Lab, but in this S3 bucket that you have here on the screen, that's pretty much the same thing as having the physical device, except you don't get to hook anything into it.
Yeah, you just don't get to dump the firmware off the chip. So we've taken that step out. So the firmware is already dumped. They're just giving it to you in that S3 bucket. And you would go through and do the same thing if you were to find any other chip. You'd go and do some analysis on the chip, and then use a flash ROM to figure that out.
Ryan, you have questions?
Yeah, I see a lot of people asking for the link that you have on that slide right there. It's not on the downloaded copies that we have. So they're looking for a copy of that link.
Let me grab that real quick.
And then Gerald wants to know, what are the implications for using this tool, and should I buy a Mazda?
Well, I mean, in all reality, I mean, you own the product. I mean, you can always go legality wise and say, I think if you hack something and you find something interesting in there, it's always due diligent to get a hold of the customer or the maker of the product to say, hey, look, I found this vulnerability in your product. I just want to disclose it to you, do the right thing and disclose it to them before disclosing it to the public, just so they're aware of it, and work through the channels to do that.
Yeah, I think you just identified my next question. Is this essentially gray hat hack?
It can be. If you are the one that's going to take it out and go, hey, this is very vulnerable, share it with the internet. I think that's something, you got to be responsible about that and not do that, be responsible, be a responsible hacker. Don't be the jerk that just says, hey, these guys are very vulnerable and this is what I found. It's just like with anything, pen testing, anything you do.
Yeah. And Deb, if you're still around, could you post the link to Ray Felch's hardware hacking for the door lock in Discord so we can share it with everybody? And that was for us, when Ray Felch brought us this blog and he said, hey, I was able to hack this smart lock. And we're like, that's great, Ray. Like, should we release this? And so we went through the whole process of contacting, is it available? Is there a fix for it? Is there a patch for it? Is there all those things before we released it? Because I would say, Deb signed off. Okay.
Yeah, that was very interesting what Ray did. Dave Fletcher actually got me involved in that. We went and bought the locks, Dave and I, and that was something that was on our agenda to do. And if you guys don't know Ray Felch, awesome guy. He's our intern, but he's retired intern. So he's already did his job and everything, worked, and then we picked him up as an intern, and we kind of threw this at him and said, hey, this is something we've been wanting to look at. We just haven't had time to do it. Can you look at it? And he did a fantastic job on that. It was just amazing. And yeah, we were excited to see that he had that. And he did such a good write-up on it too.
Yeah, I just posted the link inside GoToWebinar in the chat and inside Discord. So that is a great place to get started. First, reverse engineering, you're going to learn a lot. I know as I was getting ready to install smart locks in my house, I was like, I should definitely read this. I really, really feel like now is the good time.
Well, and the funny thing is, when we went through he was going through the research, he came up, he was looking at the app and he's like, this app's not, it's not vol. I can't find it. They obfuscated everything, which was the right thing to do, right? They did due diligence and fix that. And then we were like, well, you can go back and get apps from way past, that's out on the internet. So he's able to go back, and then he was able to go walk down that path to find out what actually kind of decipher what they obfuscated in the code to figure out how to man in the middle it and do that, which was really cool.
So that's an interesting technique that you just said. So you can take the current app and then a past version of the app, and are you doing a comparison of the two, or are you just?
Yeah, he just walked through it, did some comparison to see what if they because what they did is they took function calls that they had that were just out there. Okay, open the door. That's the function name. They just obfuscated it and made a bunch of characters. And there's some tools you can do to obfuscate your app. So they did that, and that then it was hidden. You couldn't just be like, oh, this is the function to open the door. You're like, no, this is WZ55432. You're like, I don't know what that means. So there was a lot of reverse engineering in that. That was a lot of work. I think he said he spent 3 months on that particular blog post.
Wow. Yeah, I remember Katie Knowles, met her a long time ago. But she entered into the world of IoT hacking by taking the fan remote in her room. And that's where she got started. She was like, if I hit this button, what happens? If I hit this button, what, like RF this and firmware dumping. And she's like, I learned how to hack, these devices by starting with the fan remote, because I wanted to know what signal happens when I hit this button. What does this call, or all these things. So what are your thoughts on? Go ahead.
No, I think that's very interesting. That's cool. That's really, that's kind of how I got into it. I mean, I worked contract manufacturing. We were always there to fix stuff, right? I mean, I worked all the way up. I was a technician for a while, fixing boards, cards. Then I went into engineering, and I eventually became a manager. But I still loved going down on the floor and troubleshooting that stuff and figuring out, okay, what do I need to do to figure this out? And the biggest thing, like when I was a technician, my biggest goal was to figure out what this device is doing. What is it doing at this every step through the process that it's running? Like a SCSI controller, is it reading? Is it writing? Is it initializing? We would just go through all that stuff, and that was half the battle, right? Knowing what this card does and what parts of the components do that stuff. It was really a flip for me to get into as I became a pen tester, and then I really got on the hardware side of things, was to dig in and say, okay, now I'm going to break this. How can I break this? Which was very interesting. And I'm always learning things every day. I usually take an hour or two out a night when I'm sitting around, got the TV playing some stupid show or whatever. I just can't sit there and watch TV. I have to pick up something, like the smart lock. I'll play with that for a while, or I'll find something else that I picked up at a garage sale and start pulling it apart and looking at it and see what's in there. And I think that's a cool way to go about looking for stuff. In fact, you talk about a fan. I was on a physical pen test one time, and we found this fan. I was doing a wireless portion of it, and I'm walking through the building, and I find this thing is just spewing out this information. It just keeps spewing it out. It's around this like mail room they have, and eventually we tracked it down to, it was the fan. It was this smart fan that they had, and it had a remote on the wall, and it was always communicating back and forth with the fan all the time. And that's what the wireless was. And it was very interesting to see that, because I was like, I've never seen that before. A high end, it was a very high end. I don't even remember the name of the fan. That was a long time ago. But it was pretty cool to see that. And then that was something we're like, hey, we can change the speed on your fan. Like, oh, is that really a vulnerability? I'm like, no, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the, but is this going to kill me? No.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe. Maybe, yeah. Speed it up fast enough and flies off the wall.
Yeah, Josh Wright years ago did a whole reverse engineering talk on hacking a crockpot. And at the end of it, he's like, I could change the temperature of your crockpot and ruin your meal. And I was like, no, is that terrible? Like, no, but here's all the things I learned while learning to hack a crockpot, which is what the point was.
Yeah, and then interesting chat, the RTL SDR, that's another thing that I'm really interested in, is controls, stuff like that use that you can pick up with RTL SDR. I don't know if anybody's the Hack RF1 is really cool. I got that shared. I think it's called Shared Brain with it. It actually encapsulates the Hack RF1, and then it gives you a display, and then you can put a modified firmware on it. You get out there, and then you can do all kinds of just hacking. You carry a battery around. You kind of makes your remote, so you can go and see what signals are out there wherever you're at. It's interesting because I did that, and I looked up the signals that I had at the cabin. I still have this one. I haven't figured out what it is. It's some Bluetooth signal, and I've shut down everything that I can think of that's Bluetooth there, and I still get this signal, and I'm not sure where it's coming from. So I think there's a bug in my cabin. I think somebody put it there. I should hunt that down. I like that. Josh's goal was to catch the crock pot on fire.
I am muted. What are the career paths and progressions of this type of hacking can lead to?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you could be a pen tester. There's a lot of. I think there's some. I don't think it's as prominent out there in the hardware hacking, but I think there are companies. I think it's starting to get more and more interesting. People are looking at, hey, we designed this thermostat. Can you check it out? Hack it, see what you can do with it, see if you can break it, make it do other things, which is interesting. I think it's coming. I think it is. There's a few out there that you'll get. I mean, we get some gigs every once in a while, but it's not like a pen test where everybody has to have it, all the time. So I think eventually we'll get into hardware hacking, but right now I think it's just slow until they start having more issues and more issues. And I think eventually it may be required. If you're going to put something out there, FCC might make a requirement. Hey, you got to have this tested by a pen test before you go any further.
So, Rick, I have a friend of mine that he's co-owner of a mechanic. I can't think of he fixes cars. And a part of that is hooking into the car, the computer of the car. And he is thinking about the future where you no longer have to hook into the car. It's wireless to do all the testing and everything in it. And he's like, well, the moment it becomes wireless, then can cars be ransomwared? Can you just send out a signal to ransomware an entire fleet of cars? Like, once a car becomes wireless for testing, does that open up a massive amount of tampering?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think that's, I think, there's going to be a way around it. Somebody's going to figure out a way around it. It's going to have to be very secure. Maybe it'll be a new protocol. Who knows? But yeah, that's an interesting concept. If you could hack a whole fleet of cars and ransomware them, maybe there's a reset button that they'll put in there that you could just reset it and you're good. But I don't know. I'm kind of scared for the future just because of stuff like that that's going to happen. So that's why I'm going to stick with my old vehicles that I have.
All right, we'll see if there's any other. How do you think software updates are applied to Tesla? Interesting.
That is interesting. I should ask somebody that I know owns a Tesla and say, hey, well, what do you think? I think it's actually over Wi-Fi or LTE. I think it's probably LTE because I think those are always connected through an LTE that they have. I think it's like $5 a month. I don't own a Tesla, but I'm just going off what I know.
Doesn't John have one?
John
has an older one.
An older one, yeah. I'm not sure how the new one is.
I think they're all over LTE or cellular.
Yeah, that's what I believe they are. And that gets into a sketchy area too. We don't do a lot of LTE stuff because that's kind of off limits, kind of illegal, very illegal. If you're hacking LTE, you get caught. So that's kind of something I've never got into, just because I don't want to go to jail for something, just messing around.
It's probably the most important thing you just said during this whole webcast.
Yeah, don't hack LTE.
Yeah.
And I mean, with anything, just like pen testing and hardware hacking and stuff, start to play with stuff that you have around the house, I think that's fine. You bought it, why not see what it does? But, know the bounds that, if it's communicating out to a server, don't be hacking the server, right? And you don't have authorization to do that. So just be due diligence, hack smartly, and, just be safe out there. So that's all I got to say.
All right. I think that will wrap up today's webcast unless Ryan has anything else.
Don't think so.
All right, Rick. Well, thank you. And for everyone that's going to download these S3 bucket firmware type things, is there like a start here? Like now you've heard this, you've thought about this, you're inspired by this, you're excited about this, and you're going to download this. What's the first thing they should do if this is the very first time they're seeing it?
Something, go through the walkthroughs. I just posted links to those. Check it out, and then I encourage you to look at other stuff you got around the house, or something that you pick up a garage or sale or wherever, something. I mean, don't go over your neighbors and steal our stuff, but but definitely just take a look. I mean, it's not, I think it's. I'm always interested to see what people are doing, what firmware is out there. It's really cool because a lot of times you get the old stuff, right? If you find some old stuff at a garage sale, I think David Fletcher even bought some printers and looked at the firmware on printers. So it's pretty interesting to do that. But like some people do, first do strings. I mean, that's an easy one. Do strings on it, see if you can find a password, stuff like that. And then use binwalk. Binwalk's really cool. Maybe you can find a password file in there too.
I want to go find an old CD player from 1998 that has the anti-skipping technology and see if that actually was anything. If I could download the firmware and see if there really was anti-skipping technology.
That'd be interesting. I actually have a CD, the first Kenwood put out the first portable, I think it was one of the first portable CD players, and be interested to take a look at that. I remember that cost me a crap load of money. I was in the service, and it was like, oh wow! I mean, it was like a paycheck. It was crazy.
Yeah, I got out of basic training in '96, and I went straight to the PX and bought a CD player so I could play my No Doubt CD. All right, I feel old.
Right.
Okay.
I know. Hey, I'm there. It was '94 when I did that. So.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Hackin Cast. Ryan, if you want to pop back on here, Ryan is in training today. I am the outlaw. Ryan is the shootist, and he'll make sure that the recording gets available. You got anything, Ryan, to finish?
Multitasking is hard. That's all I gotta say.
Rick, thank you so much. To all of you here at the Hackin Cast audience, we'll see you next time. And we do definitely have Hackin Cast coming up, so see you next time.
Bye. Bye-bye.